Say it again." The words came from the far end of the rehearsal dinner table, not loud, not dramatic, but every person in that private dining room stopped moving when they heard them. My sister's fiancé, Preston Delaney, still had a smile on his face when he turned toward the old man seated beside the fireplace. "What, Uncle Raymond?" Rear Admiral Raymond Delaney did not smile back. He had been quiet most of the evening, polite, observant. The kind of older man people assumed was simply tired until they realized he had been noticing everything. His fork was still in his hand, his glass of water sat untouched beside his plate, and his eyes were locked on me with a kind of recognition I had spent years trying to avoid. Preston chuckled, still playing to the room. "I just asked her Navy nickname. She said they called her Harbor Ghost." I mean, come on. That sounds like something from a comic book. A few people laughed nervously. My sister Claire did not. She was sitting beside Preston in a white silk dress, her engagement ring flashing under the chandelier, her face frozen in the exact expression she used when something threatened the perfect life she had worked so hard to stage. Rear Admiral Delaney slowly placed his fork down. Then he stood. The room went so silent I could hear the rain hitting the tall windows behind me. Preston's smile flickered. "Uncle Raymond?" The Admiral looked at him the way commanders look at young men who have mistaken confidence for character. "Apologize," he said. Preston blinked. "What? Now?" The single word cut through the room harder than a shout. My mother's hand tightened around her napkin. Claire whispered, "Preston, just." But Preston laughed again, because men like Preston laugh when they feel the floor moving under them and do not yet know they are about to fall. "Uncle, seriously, it's just a nickname." The Admiral's face did not move. "No," he said, "it is not." Then he turned toward me, not with curiosity, not with suspicion, with respect. The kind of respect people do not invent for the sake of politeness, the kind that has history behind it. "Commander Bennett," he said quietly. "I did not know you were Claire's sister." My sister's head snapped toward me. Preston's smile vanished. My mother covered her mouth. And every person at that table suddenly understood that the woman Preston had mocked all evening was not a quiet ex-Navy sister with an odd nickname. I was the officer from Operation Harbor Glass, the one the Navy had kept unnamed for years, the one Rear Admiral Delaney had apparently been trying to thank since the night I brought his son home alive. My name is Mara Bennett. I am 35 years old, and until that dinner, my sister's future husband thought I was just another awkward military relative. He could turn into entertainment between the salad and the main course. He was wrong. But to understand why his Admiral uncle stood up, you have to understand why I almost never showed up at that dinner in the first place. Claire and I grew up in a small town outside Norfolk, Virginia, close enough to the Navy that uniforms were part of the scenery. We were 2 years apart. She was older, prettier, softer in public, sharper in private. From the time we were little, Claire knew how to be liked. Teachers adored her. Neighbors praised her manners. Adults called her a natural hostess before she was old enough to understand what that meant. I was different, not unfriendly, just less polished. I liked engines, radios, maps, weather patterns, and the way boats looked when they cut through gray water. I was the child who stood too close to the pier during storms because I wanted to know how waves decided where to break. Claire thought storms ruined dresses. I thought they told the truth. Our father had served 6 years in the Navy before a back injury ended his career. He never became an officer, never commanded a ship, never wore medals impressive enough to silence a room. But he loved the Navy with the loyal ache of a man who felt he had left before his real life began. He died when I was 14, and after that, the house divided in a quiet way. Claire became my mother's hope. I became my father's shadow. That was not how anyone said it, of course. People rarely describe family roles out loud while they are assigning them. They just hand one daughter the nice dresses and the college brochures with ivy-covered buildings, and they hand the other her father's old compass and say, "You always were more like him." I did not mind at first. I loved that compass. I carried it everywhere. But over time, more like him started meaning less easy, less pretty, less suitable for the kind of life my mother wanted to brag about. Claire went to a private college in Richmond and studied communications. I joined the Navy at 18. My mother cried when Claire left for school because she was proud. She cried when I left for basic training because she was afraid I had made my life harder than necessary. Girls like Claire marry well. My aunt once said in our kitchen, then she glanced at me and added, "Girls like Mara survive." Everyone laughed softly, like it was a compliment. I did not. Survival is not an insult, but it becomes one when people use it to explain why they do not need to be gentle with you. The Navy gave me something my family never had: clear standards, hard work, consequences, a way to become useful without apologizing for it. I did not start in special operations. People always assume that after they hear the nickname, the truth was less cinematic. I began in communications, radio signal routing, encrypted systems, emergency coordination, the invisible nervous system of any mission. Most people do not think about communication until it fails. Then they think of nothing else. I was good at it, very good. I could listen to 5 broken channels and hear the one useful signal underneath. I could map failures in my head. I could remember call signs, terrain patterns, weather disruptions, backup paths. I had patience for details that made other people restless. Eventually, that patience took me into specialized operations support, then maritime recovery coordination, then classified joint missions where nobody uses full names and every second costs something. My mother understood none of it. Claire understood even less. When I came home on leave, they asked if I had met anyone nice. They asked whether I was lonely. They asked when I would choose something stable. Claire once said, "I just don't understand why you want a life where nobody knows what you do." I looked at her and said, "Maybe because doing it matters more than being seen doing it." She laughed like I had made an awkward joke. That was Claire's talent. If she could not understand something, she turned it into something socially uncomfortable. Then came Operation Harbor Glass. I will not tell you everything about it. Some things still belong to families, reports, and rooms without windows, but I can tell you enough. There was a storm system off the coast. There was a damaged civilian research vessel carrying contractors, medical volunteers, and 2 Navy technical advisors. There was also a classified piece of equipment on board that complicated the response in ways people outside the chain of command never knew. Communications failed first, then navigation. Then the vessel drifted into an area where rescue aircraft were delayed by weather and surface recovery became almost impossible. The official plan was to wait for the storm window to shift. That was the safest option on paper. But paper does not hear panic through static. Paper does not know what a man sounds like when he is trying not to tell the others that the hull is taking water. Paper does not know that a storm can change faster than permission. I was part of the coordination cell, not the highest-ranking officer in the room, not the loudest. But I was the one who had been tracking old buoy transmissions along the coast for 3 hours because something about the drift pattern did not match the model. The vessel was not where everyone thought it was. It was farther north, closer to a shelf break, closer to danger. I said so. Twice. The first time, a senior officer told me to hold my analysis. The second time, a contractor told me my data was incomplete. He was right. It was incomplete. But incomplete does not always mean wrong. Sometimes incomplete is all you get before people die. A voice came through the broken channel. Not the captain, not the commander. A young technical advisor named Lieutenant Aaron Delaney. I did not know then whose son he was. His voice was calm, but I heard the strain underneath. Coordination. If anyone reads, we have injured civilians and rising water. Main power unstable. Request updated recovery vector. The room went still. The official recovery vector was wrong. I knew it. I also knew that if I pushed too hard and I was wrong, I could send a rescue team into lethal weather for nothing. That is the kind of decision people call heroic later only if it works. If it fails, they call it reckless. I picked up the headset. This is Bennett. Hold position if possible. I am recalculating based on buoy drift and secondary current. The senior officer snapped, "Bennett, stand by." I did not. Not because I was brave, because I was already hearing the vessel disappear. For the next 22 minutes, We built a new path from broken data, a fishing captain's emergency ping, old Coast Guard buoy records, a storm radar gap, 1 week transmission, and the kind of instinct that is not magic, only experience moving faster than explanation. I redirected the first recovery boat, then the second, then talked the damaged vessel through stabilizing just long enough for the rescuers to reach them. The waves were higher than the reports said. Visvisa was worse. The rescue team nearly turned back twice. Lieutenant Delaney stayed on the channel, repeating status, helping keep civilians calm, relaying injury reports. At one point, his voice cut out for nearly 4 minutes. I remember those 4 minutes more clearly than the rest. People think action is the hard part. Waiting is worse. When his voice returned, he said, "Still here, Bennett." I answered, "Stay that way." They got them out, not cleanly, not all uninjured, but alive. 31 people recovered, 1 rescue swimmer injured, no loss of life. The report praised joint coordination. The public statement mentioned severe weather, disciplined response, and successful recovery. My name did not appear. That was fine. It had to be fine. But inside the teams that knew what happened, a nickname spread, Harbor Ghost. Because, according to one exhausted rescue chief, I had found a ship that had already become a ghost on the charts. I hated the nickname at first, then tolerated it. Then stopped correcting people because sometimes a name becomes less about pride and more about remembering the night behind it. Years passed. I left active duty earlier than planned after a spinal injury during a later assignment. Not dramatic enough for a movie, pain rarely is. One day your body simply stops absorbing what your will keeps ordering. I transitioned into civilian emergency systems consulting, mostly for ports, hospitals, and coastal counties. Quiet work, useful work. The kind of work my sister called nice, because she had no category for anything between glamorous and sad. Claire, meanwhile, had built the life my mother understood. She became an event designer for wealthy families, then met Preston Delaney at a charity gala in Annapolis. Preston was handsome in the way expensive men are handsome. Good haircut, good teeth, good suit. A voice trained to sound amused by everything. His family had money, military history, and the social confidence that comes from never wondering whether the room was built for you. When Claire called to tell me she was engaged, she sounded breathless. "Mara, he's perfect." I remember leaning against my kitchen counter, smiling despite myself. "Then I'm happy for you." "I mean it," she said. "This family is different. They're connected. His uncle was an admiral. His father knows senators. His mother is on 3 boards. I waited. Claire continued. "This wedding could really change things for us." For us. She did not mean me. That was fine. I had become skilled at hearing where I was not included. The first warning came when she asked me not to wear my uniform to any wedding event. "I wasn't planning to," I said. "I know, but just in case." Preston's family is very traditional. "I was in the Navy, Claire. His uncle was an admiral. I think they've seen uniforms." "It's not that," she said quickly. "It's just, sometimes you get intense when people ask questions. I answer questions. You answer like you're testifying." I closed my eyes. "What do you want from me?" "Just be normal for 1 weekend." There it was. Normal. The word my family used when they meant easier for them. I almost declined the dinner. I sat in my car outside the Delaney family home for nearly 10 minutes watching rain slide down the windshield and wondering why I kept showing up to rooms where people wanted me edited. The house was beautiful, old brick white columns, warm lights glowing behind tall windows, the kind of house where wealth had settled in long enough to stop introducing itself. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, dark blouse, Sybil earrings, hair pulled back, no medals. No uniform, no visible proof of anything I had ever done, just Mara Bennett, sister of the bride, trying to make it through dinner. Inside, Claire hugged me too tightly. "You came." I said I would, I know, I just wasn't sure. That hurt, but I let it pass. My mother kissed my cheek and whispered, "Please be kind tonight." Not "I'm glad you're here." Not "Are you okay?" Please be kind, as if I was the danger. Preston greeted me near the fireplace. He looked me over the way some men read resumes they have already decided to reject. "Mara," he said, "the mysterious Navy sister, Preston. Claire says you did something secret. I served." He smiled. That's very modest. I said nothing. He mistook the silence for awkwardness. Men like Preston often do. Dinner began with polished conversation. Wine, roast salmon, wedding plans. Stories about Preston and Claire's first date. Told twice because his mother loved the part where he sent flowers the next morning. I sat near the middle of the table, close enough not to seem rude, far enough not to be central. Across from me sat Preston's uncle, Rear Admiral Raymond Delaney, retired 78 years old, straight-backed, white-haired, quiet eyes. He had the kind of stillness that does not need attention because it has already survived enough rooms. He introduced himself simply as Raymond, not Admiral, not Sir, just Raymond. That told me more about him than his rank. For most of the meal, he listened. Preston did not. He performed. He told stories about business deals, sailing trips, college friends, future honeymoon plans. Every story somehow curved back toward him. Claire laughed at all the right places. My mother looked relieved that the evening appeared to be going smoothly. Then one of Preston's cousins asked what I had done in the Navy. I took a sip of water. Communications and recovery operations. Preston leaned forward. That sounds vague. It is. A few people smiled. He took that as permission. Come on, were you on ships, submarines? Were you one of those people yelling into radios in movies? Sometimes there was yelling. That got a small laugh. He kept going. What was your rank, Commander? His eyebrows lifted. Really? The word was small. The insult inside it was not. Claire shifted beside him. Preston, what? I'm impressed. He did not sound impressed. He sounded entertained. Then he said, Did you have one of those Navy nicknames? The room still had a chance at that point. Some moments stand at a fork in the road. I could have deflected, said no, changed the subject, made it easy for everyone. But I was tired of making myself smaller so other people could avoid seeing their own behavior, so I answered, Harbor Ghost. A couple of guests laughed because they thought it was funny. Preston laughed because he wanted it to be funny. But at the far end of the table, Rear Admiral Raymond Delaney stopped moving. His fork lowered slowly, his eyes fixed on me, and the room changed before anyone else understood why. Preston leaned back, grinning. Harbor Ghost? That is dramatic. Did you choose that yourself? The Admiral stood. Apologize. That was how the evening cracked open. At first, Preston thought he could repair it with charm. Uncle Raymond, come on. I'm kidding. No, everybody relax. The Admiral's voice stayed low. I said apologize. The word no longer sounded like a request. It sounded like command. Preston's father, Arthur, looked uncomfortable. His mother touched her pearls. Claire whispered, Mara, what is happening? I kept my hands folded in my lap. I'm fine. Rear Admiral Delaney did not look away from Preston. She should not have to be fine in a room where her service is being turned into a parlor trick. No one spoke. Preston's face reddened. You're making this much bigger than it is. No, the Admiral said. You made it small because you did not recognize it. That sentence did something to the room. It gave people permission to stop pretending Preston had only been joking. My mother looked down at her plate. Claire's eyes moved between her fiancé and me with a fear that was not about my feelings. It was about the wedding, the image, the Delaney family's opinion. That hurt more than I expected. Even then, my sister was calculating damage to the event. The Admiral turned to me. Commander Bennett, were you part of Harbor Glass? My throat tightened. Yes, sir. He closed his eyes. For a moment, the old man was not at a dinner table anymore. He was somewhere else, some night, some phone call, some threshold between loss and mercy. When he opened his eyes, they were wet. My nephew Aaron was on that vessel. The room went still. Preston blinked. Aaron? The Admiral nodded once. My sister's boy, your cousin. Preston's face shifted. He had heard that name before. I could tell. But probably as a family tragedy narrowly avoided, a story softened over time until it no longer had teeth. Rear Admiral Delaney looked at him. You were in college when it happened. Your parents told you Aaron had been rescued in a storm. They spared you the details. Arthur Delaney cleared his throat. Raymond, no, the Admiral said. He is old enough to hear what he mocked. The words landed hard. Preston looked at me again. This time, not with amusement, with uncertainty. The Admiral continued. 31 people came home from that vessel. My nephew was one of them. For years, I heard only fragments from people who knew the operation, a voice on the channel, a correction no one else trusted, a recovery path through impossible weather. He turned back to me. And a nickname, Harbor Ghost. I looked down. I hated this part, not the recognition, the transformation, the way a room stops seeing you as a person and starts seeing an event. I did not want to be an event. I wanted to be a sister at a rehearsal dinner, maybe an awkward sister, maybe a quiet one. But human, Preston's voice was softer now. I didn't know. I looked at him. No, you didn't. The Admiral said, "That is why respect comes before knowledge." Nobody moved. That line changed the temperature of the room. Because that was the real issue, not whether Preston understood my service, not whether he knew the operation. He had decided I was safe to mock before he knew anything. That is how many humiliations begin, with people assuming there is nothing beneath the surface worth honoring. Preston swallowed. "I'm sorry." The Admiral did not sit. "Mara," Preston said, forcing himself to meet my eyes. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have talked to you like that." The apology was not perfect. It was early, uncomfortable, but real enough to accept. "Thank you," I said. Claire exhaled like someone had lowered a weapon. But the evening did not return to normal. It could not. The truth had entered the room, and truth is not a guest that leaves just because dessert is waiting. Arthur Delaney asked quietly, "Commander Bennett, would you mind telling us what happened?" Claire shot him a panicked look. "Maybe this isn't the time." The Admiral sat slowly. "No," he said. "It may be exactly the time." All eyes turned to me. I wanted to refuse. I had refused versions of this question for years, at airports, at bars, at family gatherings. People think they want to hear about service until the story stops sounding like a movie. But this room was different now. Not curious. Listening. So I told them enough. Not everything. Enough. I told them about the storm, about the damaged vessel, about the communications failure, about the location error, about Lieutenant Aaron Delaney's voice coming through static, steady and controlled, while water rose around people he was trying to protect. The Admiral's hands closed on the edge of the table when I said Aaron's name. I did not look away. I told them about the official recovery vector being wrong, about the buoy data no one trusted, about the decision to redirect the rescue boats before permission caught up. I told them that the nickname came later, from people trying to turn fear into something they could say out loud. Harbor Ghost was not a joke, I said. It was what they called the person who found people the ocean was trying to erase. No one spoke. Preston stared at the table. Claire's eyes were full of tears now, though I could not tell whether they were for me or for the room she had almost lost control of. My mother finally looked at me, really looked, for the first time in years. I saw something like recognition in her face. Not pride exactly. Pain, maybe because she understood too late how little of my life she had asked to know. The Admiral cleared his throat. "Aaron wrote me a letter after he recovered," he said. Arthur looked surprised. "You never told us. It was not yours." The Admiral's voice was gentle but firm. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and removed a folded paper, old, opened many times. He looked at me. "I carry it on family days, weddings, funerals, graduations, days when I remember who almost was not there." My chest tightened. He unfolded it carefully. "I will not read all of it," he said, "but one line belongs here." The room held its breath. He read, "There was a woman on the radio who refused to let the storm make us disappear. I never saw her face, but I knew I was alive because she kept answering." I stared at my hands, my vision blurred. I had never heard that letter. For years, I had carried the operation as a file, a memory, a nickname, a cost. I had not known someone on the other side had carried my voice as proof of life. The Admiral folded the letter. Then, slowly, he stood again. This time, he did not speak to Preston. He spoke to the room. "I think we should stand." No one questioned him. Chairs moved back, one by one. Preston's family stood. My mother stood. Claire stood slowly, tears running down her face. Preston stood last. Not because he was resisting now, because shame had made him heavy. The Admiral faced me and gave a formal salute. A retired Rear Admiral saluting me in a private dining room, beside half-empty wine glasses and cooling food. I stood because I did not know what else to do. Then I returned it. The room did not clap. That would have made it strange. Instead, they stood in silence. And somehow, that was more powerful. A standing ovation can become performance. This was acknowledgement quiet, human, uncomfortable enough to be honest. After a few seconds, the Admiral lowered his hand. Everyone sat. The dinner resumed, but differently, not cheerful, better than cheerful, careful, respectful. Preston passed me the bread without a word, then said quietly, "Commander." It was the first time all evening he had used a title with respect instead of disbelief. I nodded. "Mara is fine." He looked relieved, but I added, "When you mean it." His face flushed, then he nodded. "I will." That was the first sign he might be capable of learning. After dinner, Claire followed me onto the back patio. The rain had stopped. The yard smelled like wet grass and old stone. Behind us, warm light spilled from the dining room windows, turning the people inside into moving silhouettes. For a while, my sister said nothing. Then she whispered, "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because the question carried years of evidence against itself. "When would I have done that, Claire?" She looked at me. I continued, "Between you asking me not to wear my uniform and asking me to be normal? Or after Mom told me not to ruin your rehearsal dinner by being intense?" She flinched. "Good, some flinches are overdue." "I didn't mean it like that," she said. "I know." That answer surprised her. I turned toward the dark yard. "You never meant it like that. That has been the story of our whole family." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I was trying to keep everything calm. For who?" She did not answer, so I did. "For Preston, for his family, for Mom, for the wedding, for the image, not for me." Her face crumpled. "Mara, I'm sorry." I looked at her then. My beautiful older sister, the girl who had once braided my hair before middle school, the woman who had spent years making me feel like a complication she loved but did not want visible. "I believe you," I said. She looked hopeful. "But I need you to understand something. I am not difficult just because I have a past you don't know how to display." The tears came then, real ones. Not wedding stress, not embarrassment, grief. "I didn't know how to be proud of something I didn't understand," she said. "That is not pride. That is branding." The sentence hit her hard. She covered her mouth. Behind us, the patio door opened. Preston stepped out. For 1 second, I thought he had come to defend himself. He did not. He stood near the door, hands in his pockets, shoulders lower than before. "Can I say something?" he asked. Claire wiped her face. I looked at him. "You can." He swallowed. "I have been around military families my whole life. My grandfather, my uncle, my cousins. And I think somewhere along the way, I started treating service like a story we owned instead of something people survived. That was not what I expected," he continued. "I was showing off tonight. I wanted to seem comfortable around things I don't really understand, and I used you to do it." The apology was getting better, more specific. That mattered. "I'm sorry," he said. Not because Uncle Raymond made me apologize, because I was wrong before he said anything. I studied him. Rainwater dripped from the edge of the awning. Inside, someone laughed softly, normal life cautiously returning. "Thank you," I said. Preston nodded, then added, "I also owe you something else." "What?" "My cousin Aaron is alive. He has 2 kids now. I danced at his wedding." His voice broke slightly. "And I made jokes tonight without knowing I was sitting across from one of the reasons that happened." For the first time, I saw the groom beneath the polish. Not a villain, a careless man with potential for humility. Those are not the same thing. "Then remember this feeling," I said. He nodded. "I will." The patio door opened again, and Rear Admiral Delaney stepped out. He looked at Preston. "You should." Preston actually straightened. The Admiral turned to me. "Commander Bennett, may I walk with you?" I nodded. We moved down the stone path into the garden, leaving Claire and Preston under the awning. For several moments, the Admiral said nothing. Then he said, "I owe you more than that salute." "No, sir." "Yes," he said. "I do." I looked at him. His eyes were on the wet path ahead. "Aaron was like a son to me. His father died when he was young. I helped raise him. When I got the call that night, they told me to prepare the family." I closed my eyes briefly. He continued. "Then hours later, they called again and said he was alive. injured but alive. He told me later there was a voice that kept pulling him back to task. We reached the edge of the garden. He stopped. For years I asked who it was. I got partial answers, protected answers. Then I heard the nickname, Harbor Ghost. He nodded. I knew if I ever met that person, I would say thank you. I did not expect to meet her at my nephew's rehearsal dinner while another nephew behaved like a fool. Despite myself, I smiled. The Admiral smiled too. Then he reached into his jacket again. This time, he removed a small challenge coin, dark blue enamel heavy, weathered at the edges from being carried. One side is from my final command, he said. The other was engraved later. He placed it in my palm. I turned it over, the engraving read. For the voice that brought them home, my throat closed. Sir, I can't. You can. His tone left no room for argument, so I held it. The coin was warm from his pocket. I spent years thinking no one remembered the details, I said. He looked at me gently. People remember the person who kept answering. That sentence followed me back inside. The rest of the evening did not become easy, but it became real. Aunt Louise asked about my consulting work. Caleb, one of Preston's younger cousins, asked how emergency coordination worked during storms. My mother sat beside me with red eyes and asked quietly, "Are you still in pain from your injury?" It was the first time she had asked directly. I answered honestly. Some days. Her face tightened. I should have asked sooner. Yes, I said. She took that in. No defense, no immediate crying. Just the truth, entering a place it should have been invited years ago. Claire kept looking at me like she was seeing a sister and a stranger at the same time. That is what happens when people finally realize they have loved a simplified version of you. It is not always cruelty. Sometimes it is laziness, sometimes fear, sometimes the convenience of not knowing. At the end of the night, as people began leaving, Preston walked me to the door. Claire hovered behind him. He held out his hand. Mara, he said. I took it. His grip was careful, not weak, careful. I would like to start over, he said. Not tonight, not with a speech, just properly. I looked at him. The wedding is tomorrow. I know. That is not much time to become decent. His mouth twitched. No, but it is enough time to stop being indecent. I laughed once, softly. That surprised both of us. Fair, I said the next day. I almost did not attend the wedding, not because I was angry, because emotional honesty is exhausting, and I had used more of it in one dinner than I usually spent in a year. But Claire knocked on my hotel room door at 8 in the morning, already in her bridal robe, hair half pinned, eyes swollen from crying. I know I don't deserve to ask anything, she said. That was a promising beginning. But will you stand with me today? I looked at her. You asked me not to wear my uniform. I was wrong. Yes, she swallowed. I don't want you hidden. Wear whatever makes you feel like yourself. For a moment, I saw us as girls again. Claire teaching me how to curl ribbon for a school project. Me helping her sneak back inside after she missed curfew. Sisters before adulthood trained us into roles neither of us had chosen carefully enough. I wore my navy dress uniform, not to make a point, because for once I was not asked to erase it. At the ceremony, Preston stood at the altar and looked directly at me when I walked in with the family. He did not smirk, did not whisper, did not perform. He gave one small nod, spectful. Human Rear Admiral Delaney sat in the front row. When I passed, he placed 2 fingers briefly against his heart. The ceremony was beautiful. Not perfect, better. Claire cried through her vows. Preston's voice shook through his. During the reception, something happened I did not expect. Before the first toast, Preston took the microphone. My body tightened. Claire looked at him with mild panic. He glanced at her, then at me. I want to say something before we begin, he said. The room quieted. Last night, at rehearsal dinner, I disrespected someone in this room. I treated her service like a joke because I did not understand it, and because I was more interested in sounding clever than being respectful. The room was very still. He turned toward me. Commander Mara Bennett, I apologize publicly because I disrespected you publicly. Thank you for coming today. Thank you for what you did for my family before I ever knew your name. No one had expected that, not even me. For 1 second, I did not know what to do. Then Rear Admiral Delaney stood slowly, deliberately, and began to clap. Others followed, not wild applause, not spectacle, a formal, grounded recognition that felt heavier than noise. I stood because sitting felt impossible. Preston lowered the microphone. I nodded once. He nodded back. And just like that, the wedding became not a perfect event, but an honest one. Later, during dinner, Aaron Delaney arrived. I had not known he would be there. He was older than the voice in my memory. Of course he was. We all were. He walked with a slight limp, his wife beside him, 2 children trailing behind. When Preston introduced us, Aaron looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "Still here, Bennett." The words hit me so hard I had to grip the back of a chair, because that was what he had said through static years ago. "Still here," I answered the only way I could. "Stay that way." He smiled, then he hugged me, not like a stranger, like someone closing a loop that had stayed open too long. His daughter, maybe 6 years old, looked up at me and asked, "Did you help my daddy?" I knelt to her height. "A lot of people helped your daddy." She frowned. "But did you?" Children have a way of refusing adult evasions. "Yes," I said softly. "I helped." She threw her arms around my neck. It was small, unexpected, devastating. I held her carefully and looked over her shoulder at Rear Admiral Delaney, who had turned away toward the window. His shoulders were shaking. That was the moment I forgave the night before. Not Preston fully, not my family fully, but the fact that the truth had arrived messily. Sometimes truth does that. It knocks over glasses, stops dinners, embarrasses grooms, makes old admirals stand up. Then, if people are brave enough, it leaves the room better than it found it. Over the following months, Claire changed in ways I did not trust at first. She called more often, not to ask for favors, not to discuss appearances, just to ask about me. At first, I gave short answers, then longer ones. Trust is not a switch, it is a staircase. She visited my office once and watched me train a county emergency team for hurricane season. Afterward, she stood beside my car for several minutes before speaking. "I used to think your work made you hard," she said. I waited. "I think it made you careful." That was closer to the truth than anything she had said in years. My mother changed too, slowly. She asked about my injury, about my therapy, about whether certain holidays were difficult, about Dad's compass, which I still kept in my desk. One afternoon she said, "I think I let people call you strong so I would not have to worry about you." That sentence hurt, but I was grateful for it because it was honest. Preston and I never became close, but we became respectful. At family gatherings, he stopped performing around me. He asked before telling people I had served. He corrected others when they made careless comments, not dramatically, just firmly. Once, at Thanksgiving, a cousin said, "Mara probably has crazy war stories." Preston said, "Or we could let her eat." I looked at him across the table. He gave a small shrug. Progress is not always poetic. Sometimes it is a man passing potatoes while protecting your peace. Rear Admiral Delaney died 2 years after the wedding. At his memorial service, Aaron found me near the back of the chapel. He handed me a folded envelope. "Uncle Raymond wanted you to have this." Inside was a letter in the Admiral's steady handwriting. "Commander Bennett, I have lived long enough to know that gratitude often arrives late, because pride, secrecy, or simple human clumsiness delays it. I regret that mine came to you at a dinner table after disrespect forced the door open. Still, I am grateful the door opened. You brought Aaron home. Because of you, I watched him marry, become a father, and grow older than he might have. That is not a small gift. It is a lifetime of gifts delivered through one decision in a storm. Carry the name Harbor Ghost only if it serves you. Put it down whenever it does not. You owe no one performance. With respect, Raymond Delaney, Rear Admiral, United States Navy." Retired. He folded the letter and held it for a long time. Carry the name only if it serves you. Put it down whenever it does not. That was the kind of permission nobody had ever given me. For years, I thought healing meant becoming comfortable with what happened. Now I know better. Healing means being able to choose when the past enters the room. That is all. Not forgetting, not performing. Choosing. So if you are listening to this because someone mocked a part of you they did not understand, remember this. Not every wound needs to be explained to be real. Not every title needs to be defended. Not every story needs to become dinner entertainment. Respect should not depend on proof. The people around your table do not need to understand every storm you survived before they speak to you with care. They only need humility. And if they do not have it yet, sometimes life sends an old admiral to stand up and remind them. My sister's groom mocked my Navy nickname. He thought Harbor Ghost was a joke. Then his admiral uncle stood up. Not because of the nickname itself, because he understood the night behind it. He understood that some names are not decorations. They are memorials, receipts, warnings, proof that someone was there when others needed them. That dinner could have ended with embarrassment. Instead, it became a beginning. For Preston, it began with apology. For Claire, it began with seeing me. For my mother, it began with asking. For me, it began with realizing I did not have to hide the past or perform it. I could simply carry it with dignity, and when necessary, I could put it down. So yes, they called me Harbor Ghost, but my real name is Mara Bennett, sister-daughter. Commander, woman still here, and if this story reminded you of someone who carries more than people know, share it with them. Comment respect first, if you believe people should be honored before they are understood. And subscribe for more stories where the quiet person at the table finally gets the truth they deserve.